He'd been sitting at the corner table for almost half an hour, completely overlooked. "Don't bother with him," the waitress muttered as she passed, barely glancing at the older man. No one brought a menu, no one poured water. Nothing. But silence surrounded him. Yet the man didn't raise a fuss. He just straightened up, folded his hands over the hat in his lap, a weathered cap with a crookedly sewn U.S. Army insignia, and waited patiently. Then, the door chime jingled. A tall man in a sharp suit entered, but stopped in his tracks the moment he saw the old man. Recognition hit instantly. Within a quarter of an hour, the entire place would be his. Harold, 78, moved slower these days. His joints were stiff, his fingers lined with age, but every Tuesday morning he came to Melvin's Grill. Same corner seat, same strong black coffee. That day he sat in silence, his old military cap resting in his lap. The diner wasn't even that busy. 2 waitresses moved around, chatting and refilling cups, for everyone but him. One looked toward him, then turned without a word. The other walked by with a smirk and said under her breath, "He's just loitering." A man at a nearby table snickered. Maybe he thinks he already ate. Harold didn't flinch. He pulled, his coat tighter, his stomach growling, and waited. Inside the kitchen, laughter echoed and plates clinked. But his table stayed untouched. Eventually Harold stood up, still without a meal or a word from staff. As he reached the door, the waitress rolled her eyes and scoffed. "You should have said something, old-timer." Harold gave a polite nod and tipped his cap. He'd long ago learned that raising his voice rarely changed anything. Vietnam taught him that sometimes silence carried more weight than shouting. He used to come to Melvin's because the original owner, Doug Melvin, a Korean War veteran, made sure every service member felt welcome. But Doug had passed away 3 years ago, and now his son had taken over. The warmth had left with the founder. Outside, Harold paused on the sidewalk. Through the glass, he could see the staff laughing and tending to a suited businessman, a young woman with earbuds in, and a couple snapping selfies. All of them got their orders within minutes. His own reflection looked back at him, snowy hair, sun-worn skin, and the eyes of a man who'd seen too much. A man who felt forgotten. He squared. His shoulders, the instinct from years in uniform still guiding him. He didn't need their food. He just missed what the place had once stood for: respect, camaraderie, belonging. Instead, he'd go to the park, maybe feed the birds. They always seemed glad to see him. Behind him, the doorbell rang again as more customers strolled in. He didn't turn around. Sometimes dignity was all a man had left, and Harold still had his. As he sat on a bench across the street, he zipped up his coat. A small boy passed by with his mother and whispered, "Why's that man sitting all alone?" The woman gently replied, "Don't stare, honey." Inside the diner, the cook muttered, "That guy gives me the creeps. Bet he never tips either." Harold checked his wristwatch. Nearly an hour since he'd walked in. He sighed and closed his eyes. A breeze brushed across his face. Cold didn't bother him. He'd slept through worse, in foxholes on foreign soil, in makeshift shelters under fire. In his coat pocket was a creased photograph from 1972, his squad in Vietnam. One of them, a young officer, had written on the back, "If you ever need me, just call." At 8:53 a.m., the bell above Melvin's door rang again. A silver-haired man stepped inside, his tailored suit spotless, his steps sharp. The whole diner quieted. He looked around until his gaze found the bench outside. His face changed. The man's briefcase hit the floor. "Sergeant Harold Grant," he called out. Harold opened his eyes and stood, squinting. "Colonel Russell?" he asked in disbelief. "General now," the man said quietly. "But I'm still your subordinate, Sergeant." The waitress peeked, out confused. "Can I help you, sir?" "Yes," the general replied firmly. "Bring me the owner, now," she blinked. "Why?" "Because I'm buying this diner today." Harold, still seated on the bench, watched through the window as the energy shifted inside. Diners were whispering, staff moving fast. The same waitress who had walked past him earlier was suddenly full of urgency, rushing toward the manager. Harold rubbed the arthritis in his hands, unsure how to feel. Embarrassed, certainly, but beneath that, something unfamiliar in years. Recognition. A delivery van rolled past, momentarily blocking his view. When it cleared, he saw General Russell, inside the diner, speaking firmly, gesturing with purpose. Harold didn't need to hear the words to recognize the authority in his old commander's body language. Shoulders back. Voice calm but commanding. Two teenagers nearby paused and stared at the scene. One nudged the other, whispering, "Something. Crazy's happening at Melvin's." "Probably just some rich guy showing off," the other shrugged. If only they knew. If they had any clue who Russell really was. The man who once led dozens through a deadly ambush, who dragged wounded men to safety without blinking, who never forgot a birthday or a child's name of anyone under his command. A police cruiser pulled up quietly and parked out front. The officer stepped out and entered the diner, straightening his posture. Harold thought about leaving. He hadn't come for attention, just breakfast. But before he could rise, the door flew open again. General Russell strode across the street. With determined steps, a car horn blaring as it screeched to avoid hitting him. "Sergeant Grant," his voice boomed, sharp and clear like it was decades ago. "Why are you sitting out here in the cold?" Harold stood automatically. "No reason, sir." "No reason?" Russell frowned. "I saw how they treated you." "It's fine. I'm used to it." "Well, I'm not," the general snapped. "And you shouldn't be either." He extended his hand, not to shake, but to gesture. "Come inside with me, Sergeant. It's time a few folks learned what respect looks like." Harold hesitated. "Sir, I didn't come here to cause trouble." "You're not," Russell replied, smiling for the first time. "You're correcting it, like you always did." Inside, the manager laughed nervously. "You're kidding, right?" "I don't joke about respect," Russell replied flatly. "Write the sale. I'll pay whatever you ask." The owner stammered, "But this is a family business." "Exactly," Russell said. "And a real family takes care of its own, especially the ones who served." Harold stood at the window, unsure what to feel. "Why would you do all this, sir?" "Because you taught me to never leave a man behind," Russell said, stepping closer. "That includes diners." The diner fell into an uneasy hush. The waitress who had brushed Harold off earlier now stood frozen, her face drained of color. "I didn't know who he was," she mumbled, barely audible. Russell turned to her, calm but stern. "You don't have to know someone's background to treat them with basic decency." Within the hour, a reporter from the local channel had arrived, camera crew in tow. The story spread like wildfire. "Veteran ignored at local diner. His former commander buys the place on the spot." By sunset, Harold's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. News vans showed up. Neighbors stopped by. That evening, for the first time in a long while, Harold sat back in his usual booth, but it was far from quiet. Veterans began pouring in. Some saluted. Some hugged him. A group of young cadets asked to take pictures. A child walked in, clutching a crayon drawing of the flag, and said, "Thank you for everything." By the next morning, Russell returned. This time with a folder under his arm and a contract inside. The paperwork was signed. The diner now belonged to him. But the new name on the building wasn't his. The sign above the front window now read, "Harold's Table." A bronze plaque just inside the entrance read, "For those who served and waited too long to be seen." As sunlight filtered through the windows, Harold watched the change happen in real time. Workers installed framed photographs along the walls. Not stage pictures, but real ones. Snapshots of American service members, from World War II to modern-day Afghanistan. A young staffer handed Russell a hammer, and he tapped the first frame into place himself. A black and white shot of Harold's unit in Nam. Throughout the day, veterans trickled in, eyes wide with disbelief. Some brought medals, others brought stories. A small TV crew huddled in the corner booth, filming interviews for a follow-up story. In a rare act of loyalty, the young anchor rehearsed, a retired general honors the forgotten soldiers of his past by transforming a diner into a symbol of remembrance. Harold, overwhelmed, sat quietly with a coffee in his hand. A new waitress, not the one from before, walked over with a fresh cup. "On the house," she said softly. "And I'm sorry for how things were." Harold nodded with quiet grace. "You didn't do it." "I know," she replied, "but someone needed to say it." Across the room, the previous owner packed a cardboard box, clearing out his office. His face was tight with shame as he passed Harold's table without looking up. Harold didn't glare or gloat, just quietly said, "Your father would have been disappointed." The man stopped, shoulders sagging. "Yeah, I know," he whispered, then walked out without another word. General Russell slid into the seat, across from Harold. They sat quietly for a while. Two aging soldiers, their ranks different, their bond unshaken by time. "Was all this necessary, sir?" Harold finally asked. Russell stirred his coffee slowly. "You remember that night outside of Saigon? We were surrounded. Protocol said you should have pulled back." "But I didn't," Harold said, almost smiling. "No, you didn't. You came back with fresh rounds, water, and a tiny radio because I'd asked about the game score. Yankees were playing that day." Harold chuckled faintly. "You broke the rules," Russell said, "because it was the right thing to do. This diner, it's not about revenge. It's about fixing something that's been broken for a long time." Harold leaned back, his hands resting on the edge of the table. "I never wanted special treatment." "Common courtesy isn't special treatment," Russell answered firmly. "And being forgotten, that ends here, at this table." Just then, the rumble of motorcycles echoed outside. A half-dozen riders rolled into the lot, parking with care. They wore worn leather vests marked with unit patches and service dates. One stepped inside, a woman with gray braids under her helmet. "Sergeant Grant," she said, saluting with a smile. Words spreading. "We came to see for ourselves." Weeks passed. By the end of the month, Harold's table began hosting free breakfasts every Thursday for veterans, no strings attached, just hot meals and warm respect. Harold came every week, not as a guest, but as the honorary host. He didn't charge for anything. He simply listened. One day, the original waitress, the one who'd ignored him, asked to stay on staff. Russell agreed, but under one condition: she had to complete 20 volunteer hours at the local VA hospital. She did. And the first time she returned to serve Harold, she brought his coffee early, piping hot, and with a smile. "Thank you, Sergeant," she said with conviction. "I won't forget again." Harold nodded, eyes misty. "That's all I ever wanted." A framed picture of him and Russell, arm in arm, now hung by the register. Underneath it read, "This table isn't just for meals. It's for remembering." The Fry Diner quickly became a local legend. Teachers brought students to meet Harold and hear real stories. A history class asked to interview him for a veterans project. The mayor handed him a key to the city. Even the governor stopped by during his campaign, but Harold politely declined to be featured in political ads. Yet it wasn't the ceremonies or the media buzz that meant the most. It was the quiet moments. Like the day a fresh-faced recruit walked in, barely out of boot camp, clearly nervous and out of place. Harold scooted onto the stool beside him, ordered 2 coffees, and sat without a word. No interrogation. Just a space to feel seen. Russell dropped by now and then, always sitting across from Harold at the same booth. Sometimes they talked about war, sometimes baseball, sometimes nothing at all. The walls of Harold's table continued to fill. Donated medals, yellowed letters from soldiers long gone, a pair of desert boots, bronzed and mounted. Every piece carried a story, a memory, a name. But the most powerful change couldn't be framed. It was in the way people acted. No vet waited more than a moment for service. No uniform went unnoticed. And no one sitting alone stayed alone for long. The entire staff had adopted a new code: respect first. One winter morning, snow drifting softly outside, a woman in her 30s walked in and approached Harold. "You probably don't remember me," she said. "My grandfather was Doug Melvin. He started this place." Harold smiled warmly. "He was a good man." "He was," she said. "And he'd be proud of what you've done here." "Not just me," Harold replied. "It took all of us." Spring, 3 other diners in neighboring towns had adopted the same model, calling their own versions legacy tables. A quiet movement was spreading, not because of a dramatic purchase, but because someone finally saw what had always been. There, Harold still sat by the window every Tuesday, not waiting anymore, but welcoming.